this is something that's like has had countless downstream effects for me, but it's the idea of the way that analysis can happen, clear thinking can happen, and the idea of realizing that the idea that the truth that you may perceive, you can only get that truth when it's shared with others and when others are sharing it with you.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I like to welcome our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive, their time. 24 hours has been offered to every one of us on this planet. What we do with our time will tell me much about you. You have to learn to value that beautiful time that we have here. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It has created us. It has given us some information that we want access to from Adam. And so that information that is deposited in him, wisdom, knowledge, insights, and all of those things. And so we want to honor him and thank him for coming and sharing both of this precious commodity with us. Adam, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for having me, Ken. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation.
It is an honor, man. As I mentioned to you, I always ask this question. I like leveling it at the individual, if you will, as to how do you serve mankind? And that gives the audience an opportunity to hear your vision and your assignment that you have on this planet. Because I tell people, we didn't come here to have a job. We came here to locate our assignment. So how do you serve mankind?
It's a great question. There's a teaching which basically says it's a Hebrew expression which basically says that anyone who gives maaser, which is 10% of their earnings, then they become wealthy. It's the one thing that it says God says, test me in this one thing. But the word for 10% also means mu'ushar, which means wealthy. And so the idea is that when we have an impact on others, when we give towards others, we are enriched by that experience. That could be literally in giving of our time. That could be literally giving of our resources. That could be giving our attention. That could be giving of our teachings. And again, there's lots of studies that have shown that those who teach end up having a greater insight through the process of teaching. So there's this idea of this two-way relationship. So from my perspective, there's lots of things that we can contribute and we can give. As far as on my own personal level, I've done a series of things over my time here on this planet that has been contributory. I previously was a rabbi for a community, ran programs, I taught classes, I did outreach. So that was one way that I contributed. After that, I ended up working and helping start a private school, that the purpose of the private school was sustainability of good education through a low tuition that was affordable. And the idea of that simply was that we can coalesce resources in a way that can contribute in a positive way to the education of children without it having to be burdensome on the parents. So that's another thing that I've done. And interestingly, I feel like there's these two types of ways that people think about it. And I think that often people will think about the way that they contribute towards mankind has to be in a big macro way. And if it's not something that's earth shattering, it's not something that's valued. And I personally believe that one of the greatest contributions that you can give to mankind is on the most personal, basic level. And that's in your immediate sphere, whether or not it's in your immediate community or in your personal life and your family life. So I'm blessed to have 7 children who I try to raise as good children and that they should have a positive impact on the world. And I ultimately would say that that's probably the greatest thing that I can do and contribute to mankind. Aside, obviously, I'm joking.
Yeah.
But the book that you heard about, which is why I came on here, which is called The Wonder Effect. It's one of these projects that I believed that if the ideas in there would get out into the world, I think that they would have a positive impact on the world. On my business level, I'm in real estate, so it's not something that has you necessarily a direct impact on others. Obviously, it does because it's places where people live, but I mean, not in the way that you might be thinking of serving mankind. But from that global perspective, that would be the book. On a personal level, it would be my family, and on a business level, I'm trying to employ people, and I'm trying to create living situations for people that are positive.
Yeah, the real estate part is helping, is serving in a way because it's a need that definitely needs to that families, as families are growing and expanding, would love to have that guidance, if you will. So, Adam, one of our customs here on the planet and in Threads of Enlightenment that I tell people on this planet is to go back. I like to go back what I call the beginnings of our beginnings, because we came to this planet and we have certain spaces that we visit as we are walking towards life independence, if you will. And as we are walking through life and going to our independence, we encounter different issues and series of situations in life that help create you and I. And one of the very first space that we visit is called the family. In this unit, we will learn a lot about things there. We learn about as far as relationship, we learn about, I call it our traumas that reside there sometimes, and communication skills, all kinds of wonderful stuff we will develop right here. How perception, how we perceive the world and all of these things began there. What was your family unit like?
So I grew up with three siblings, three sisters. My parents were from diverse backgrounds, and I was raised with Jewish values.
Mhm.
And within like the specific Jewish world, I was raised as a Reform Jew, not Orthodox and not traditional in the sense
Yeah.
that I am today. So I definitely have grown and changed in that way. But the values that I grew up with, I think, have contributed a lot to who I've become as a person. My father started out running an ad agency or marketing firm in New York State, and
Mhm.
he actually was in charge of in the 60s was in charge of marketing for the NAACP for the state of New York. And I
Mhm.
always grew up with a sense of justice and of trying to have a positive impact and make the world a better place than we found it. So that's definitely something that I had, which would be contributory to who I've become as a person. And my mother was a stalwart for me in kindness
Yeah.
and in listening and being an ear towards both people and towards myself and towards our family. So I'm grateful for having grown up in a really loving household and a household that had good values.
That is awesome. I love the beginnings, Adam, because there is where we began to form, if you will, as young individuals, as we are looking out towards the world. And you had a excellent foundation. One, as you said, you began to understand about justice and love and respect and all of different things that you're gathering there. What was that, all of that you saw within the family? How did it affect Adam and how he related to others?
What I would say is that the way that it affected me specifically was I became sensitive to others and trying to be sensitive to people's feelings. It gave me a strong
Mhm.
awareness of where people are coming from and the ability to see people's perspectives.
So here's this young man learning empathy at a pretty young age, learning to be aware, if you will, of others and their needs and so forth. And as you're moving through your life, Adam, and you're heading into college, that arena, this is another space that we visit for a long time, for a short time, if you will, as we're moving through. What degree did you study? Why did you pick it?
What was the question?
What degree did you pick? What field of study did you pick, and why did you pick that field of study?
Right. So it's interesting because I early on didn't, and this was I had big influence. So my father, he had dyslexia. We were
Mhm.
aware of that growing up, and it meant that he had lots of learning challenges that most people or many people don't have. Yet he had the ability to overcome those challenges and have outside successes while I was growing up. He did lots of different things. But primarily when I was growing up, he was in the broadcast business. In radio stations, and he did he promoted concerts and he promoted live events and all sorts of stuff. So I grew up in a very interesting household. So the what that did for me, and I am answering your question, what that did for me is realize that you can have unconventional paths to success.
Mhm.
So I actually became very interested in a few different things, but predominantly around 15, 16, I became very into philosophy and Jewish mysticism and psychology. And I started reading books on it, and it lit something in me of deep interest. And when
Yeah.
I was 16 years old, I was finishing my junior year in high school, and I made the decision that I wanted to go to a summer program in Israel and study. In my heart, I knew that I was probably going to stay longer than just the summer. And when
Mhm.
I arrived, I absolutely loved it. And I loved the learning environment. And subsequently, I ended up staying there for approximately 2 years studying in Israel. I was studying Jewish law. I was studying Jewish philosophy, history. I was learning a lot, and it was all guided self-learning. So I ended up continuing in that school system for about 7 years, actually. At the end of that journey, I ended up having a bachelor's degree in religious studies and a and rabbinical ordination. So that was the path that I took. Subsequent to that, I ended up getting my master's in business, and I ended up also participating in a business program at Harvard Business School that I was fortunate enough to get in and complete recently. And so, like I have found on a personal level that and it's like a classic thing that I write in the book, which is that if you pull the threads of interest, you would be surprised about all of the things that can come out of that. And I would say that the decision that I made, and I think that the most important thing that we can do in life is make decisions. Because back to our previous conversation just before we went on, we were talking about this idea of the traumas or the experiences that people have. If they choose to learn something from it, then they can grow. So what I think that the key point in that is the idea of the decision, because I think that we learn from all the experiences that we have, but learning is not what necessarily leads to growth. Learning is a component to growth, but being willing to pull that thread of interest that you have to have a level of an adventurous spirit where you're willing to make decisions and take steps beyond where you feel you might be able to get to. That is what, in my mind, leads to growth. So again, the idea of this possibility of unconventional success, it's all I've really ever seen. And I'm sure there's people that are successful that go down the paths that everyone else goes to and the paths that other people say that they should. But there's one other idea that I feel like is important. Again, I tried to coalesce all of my experiences into the book, and the idea is about not letting the fear of failure inhibit you from taking those next steps.
Yeah, that's one of the fear of failure is one of those, for lack of a better word, Adam, one of those monsters that we have created in our life due to whatever situation that is that we have brought in that belief. And we hold on to it, many of us, and not have the opportunity to free ourselves from it, to experience, as you said, to expand the self, to go beyond that. What's beyond that, if you will? And so as we are learning about what's beyond that, that's how we get a chance to experience who we are and learn about the aspects of the self as we go beyond the fear of. And fear of is many of the things that we deal with in life. Adam and I had a conversation before, and then we were talking about one of the reasons that behind Threads of Enlightenment about my friend. And I didn't start it because of fear of. And I had to learn how to release that fear of to begin the podcast, because I know it would bring me to a place by which I'm going to have to be vulnerable, open to people. And this is something I didn't want to do. So we all have those fear of. But as Adam says, there's adventures beyond that. And I can tell you that from experience. So here you are, Adam. You graduated.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do want to touch on a very important point, which I think that there's this popularity, like a mental popularity, and I think there's something positive about it. But I just want to share the flip side of that, and that is this idea of fear. And now, even while I'll say that the fear of failure is something that may inhibit people, I want to touch on like the importance of fear. Again, I feel like it's something that's not popular, but I do think that it's important to be aware.
It's a motivator.
So there's
right, it's a great motivator.
Yes, and there's this great story that I was fortunate enough to hear from the person who had this experience. But there was I'm trying to remember his name right now. His name Robert O'Neill. So Robert O'Neill was the person in the military that landed in, I believe it was Afghanistan, and he was the one who took the kill shot on Osama bin Laden. And there's a fascinating story about the way that took place and the risks that were taken by the military to do it. And he was asked, I was in the in the audience at the time when he was sharing the story, and someone asked him, like, were you afraid when you were on this mission? So the line has stuck with me ever since I heard him say it, and it's the reason that I'm sharing it with you, because I think that it's important for people to be aware of this. And what he said was, fear is what keeps you alive. Panic is what gets you killed. So the reason we have a fear is an important thing. In other words, it's to heighten our senses and heighten our abilities so that we are protective and make sure that we don't either get killed or lose everything that we're trying for. So it's important to realize that it is an important piece in growth, but it should not necessarily be the thing that prevents us from doing anything. And you should realize that the thing that you're really trying to prevent more is don't panic, because panic is what ruins everything, and it's the thing that gets you killed.
I will agree with you on that. So here you are, Adam. You've studied, you went through it for a while, and you gained insight. And with all the data that you studied in school and college, what effect did it have on you? And again, coming from the side that you're coming from, what effect did it have on this young man that came from a different country, came into this country, a new country, and have his, to adapt to all of that? But that data, how did it begin to impact your life and your decisions, if you will?
So the school that I went to is called a yeshiva, and it literally means a house of sitting, where you sit and learn. That's where what the name of it is. Well, I feel like it's countless things that I would say it had impacts on me. So one of the things that it had is this idea of discipline. So discipline, the root of that is a disciple. And that means a disciple is one who learns. And the only way that you can learn is if you, again, make the decision to be conscious and cognizant and take seriously that process. So one of the things that it definitely had an impact on me is in having discipline and learning. The learning and its impact on me was had multiple things. One of the things that you study in yeshiva is called the Gemara or the Talmud, and they're both synonymous. The way that you learn that is basically in partnerships with a fellow student. So you sit across the table from each other, you both have the same book, and you both learn it together. This is often in preparation for a class, which will be at a higher level. But that process of learning basically is trying to understand the text and trying to understand the commentaries on the text. And each of you act almost as a sparring partner in that process, where you might have a different way of looking and you're arguing your perspective and they're arguing on their perspective. But you're both coming to it from a sense of searching for the truth in it, not in advocating for your ideas. So when you're arguing, it's not arguing for the sake of argument. It's arguing for the sake of being able to reach the truth. And often the truth you can only arrive at when you have somebody else that's there offering a different perspective. So this is something that's like has had countless downstream effects for me, but it's the idea of the way that analysis can happen, clear thinking can happen, and the idea of realizing that the idea that the truth that you may perceive, you can only get that truth when it's shared with others and when others are sharing it with you. So I think that that's a huge perspective that I had and what it taught me. Another thing on the side of like Jewish philosophy or Jewish mysticism is the idea of the sensitivity that you have to bring to almost any situation, but the idea that there are layers and layers of meaning, layers and layers of underlying threads that you might not be aware until your awareness gets sensitized. So what it did for me was give me a sensitivity towards ideas and towards others. So those are two big impacts that it had and provided to me.
I mean, that's a powerful impact, if you will, Adam. You're learning critical skills. And I love that approach where you're able to have that individual face to face and you are seeking truth from different vantage points. And as you engage in that conversation, that truth, as you begin to expose and to delve into it, becomes rich, becomes even more impactful in your life, and how it would change you once you have arrived to that truth. That is a powerful way to approach it. And from the mystical side and all of the different things that you learn, the sensitivity, which is very important when we're learning to deal with others, if you will, and to be aware of the others in front of us, and so that we can be empathetic in their need and their need as they're sitting before us. As you're moving through your life, one of the things that you'd mentioned that you were a rabbi for several years. In that space, one learns much as to human behavior, human mindset, and all of those different things. What would you say was your experience, and what did you learn if you were pulling on some threads that you saw familiarity in all of us globally, but that we have as we come before someone like you with needs and all of these different things? What did you see as a similarity amongst all of us as one that is sitting in that position?
Just so that I'm clear on the question, you're asking what did I learn about the similarity of humanity?
Humanity and coming with all of these different situations that are problems that people say, but they're situations that they're bringing to you. What did you notice? What did you learn from that time?
The first thing that comes to my mind right now when you're saying it is something that I didn't specifically learn from a Jewish source, but and I'm only saying that because of the perspective and the position that I was in. But
Yeah.
there's a famous author who I can't think of at the moment, but he wrote the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. So one
Yeah.
of the things that he says in there is seek first to understand and then be understood. And I think that
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people simply want to be seen and be understood. And I think that if you are bringing the perspective to them in that way, where when you're meeting with people and when you're talking with them, you're not simply trying to drive an agenda, but you're trying to hear where they're coming from to truly understand where they are coming from, what their perspective is. I think then there's the true possibility of a relationship, and the idea of a relationship allows for growth to go both directions. So
Yeah.
there's a famous expression it's called the chapters of our fathers. And what it says is that from all of my teachers, I'm paraphrasing, from all of my teachers, I've learned a lot, but I've learned most from my students. And that idea is that when there's an interchange of knowledge and an interchange of conversation, that's where true growth comes. But it can only come about when you are actually interested and actually engaged in trying to understand the perspective of the person that you're talking with.
Yeah, I agree. You had mentioned that you were there for a season, if you will, and you had this other degree as to business and so forth. Let me ask you this. Why someone being in a position as a rabbi, why would you venture from that perspective, if you will? And what caused it? And what was that shift that took place in your life that caused you to take a different route, if you will?
So the business degree came about while I was working at the school that I helped start. So the school was one of the best schools that I have been involved with, and they were very big on personal growth. So when I told them that this was something that I had an interest in pursuing, they were very positive and very helpful for me to pursue that. The position that I was in was called the director of operations, and since it was about running a school, that was where the idea of getting a degree that had to do with business and operations, that's where it came from. So it was a natural lead in. But what was
Yeah.
really amazing was that oftentimes you might see where you're in a position or you work for a company, and the one thing that they want you to do is just stay there and not necessarily grow. And I commend
Yeah.
them for having that perspective. And the person that was really instrumental in allowing this, he was a person that I worked with there. His name was Rabbi Rami Strasberg,
Hmm.
who was had a great influence on my life. I'm still friends with him today, and he was the one that I had this conversation with.
That's awesome, man. Personal development, and again, when one is exposed to spirituality, I think one of the natural phases, if you will, the progress or process of being exposed to spirituality is a acknowledgement of personal growth. It demands that we or opens the door for us to see the need of that because we are allowed to get a glimpse into character development, if you will. As one is in the space of personal development, as you said, the opportunity came by. How did that begin to affect you? All the principles of personal development, because we learn these things and we put inputting data into our life. How did you, once you began to input those data on personal development, how did it affect you? But also the school, you saw kids and children with that knowledge and stuff like that. How did that play out in your life? And what effect did you see in those young kids with the knowledge of personal development being a part of their upbringing, if you will?
So I would say and again, like it's just interesting. The questions are great, and the conversation is phenomenal so far. Just want to acknowledge that. The book like really distills a lot of these things very succinctly into it. So I don't remember which chapter it is, but basically the perspective that I have and that I try to put into the book is the following idea. I believe that we are all here for a reason and for a purpose. And I believe sometimes that emerges from a calling from the outside. And what I mean by that is sometimes you're simply in a situation where you see that something needs to be done and something can be done. And so you step up to the plate and you try to solve that problem or try to accomplish that thing that needs to be done. And I believe that the reason that you're here and the purpose that you're here for is uniquely yours. And I believe that the only way that we can get to achieving that and get to accomplishing that is by being willing and able to have a cultivation of our resources and our own personal strengths. And that all comes about through growing and through learning. And the purpose of the learning and the purpose of the growing is not just an end in and of itself that you should grow, but that you should have the capacity and the ability to make those changes, make those differences, and serve those that need to be served and fulfill the reason and the purpose that you're here for. That's really the perspective where I come from in the book and where and from the experiences that I've had.
I 100% agree with you because I always tell people we did not come here to have a job. Each and every one of us came here with an assignment. And that assignment, however it comes, because there's a million different ways for us to be aware of it, it is where we ought to be living from because that is why we are here. And it becomes imperative that we learn. And as you said, we have to do the work to get there so that we can know first of all, know what it is, identify it, and then do all the things necessary in order to become that individual that will serve from that space. And I believe that's why we're all 8 billion of us are here is for that reason. And so that we can come from 8 billion different vantage points because no one is able to see the full picture, if you will. We are just helping each other on, as we walk along. Talk to us about the book, Adam. How did it materialize? Because as you're moving through, the reason why I'm asking these is to see your process and how did it get to the place by which you are now commissioned, if you will, to then take all of this knowledge that you have gained from the different perspective and so forth in your life and put it into a format now by which you are able to feed those that want to get into the book and to read and to excavate from you and your knowledge. How did that process take place? And in writing the book, how long did it take you?
So I've attended lots of different, I've been a part of lots of different groups. That there was one group that I was involved with, which is called GoBundance. And the idea of it is a 360 on life and personal cultivation and personal growth. And I heard a lot of people advocating for writing a book, that everybody has a book in them. So I would say that was a seed for me having an interest in doing it.
Mhm.
And I would say that at the time that I began writing the book, I had made the decision. Like I said, a lot of these things emerge from a decision. I'd made a decision that I'm going to write a book, and then the question is, what is it going to be about? So at the time, my oldest son was probably about 17 or 18, and I had a dream, which I still do. I haven't engaged with it yet, but again, I put stuff out there because you never know. But I had this idea of basically creating an alternative secondary school, which would mean like a university type of thing, but not in the
Mhm.
traditional sense. The what I really wanted it to be is basically cohorts of kids between the ages of 18 and 25 that are looking to achieve something or create something in the world. It could be business, it could be nonprofit. Like I don't want to pigeonhole it into just
Yeah.
one thing, but it's basically to do something, not to get a job, but to be able to create and solve a problem. Again, that problem solving could either be nonprofits or for profits. To me, it didn't matter as far as doing this. And I wanted to be able to pair these groups of people with people that are much further along in that journey, that have done different things and could give them at least somewhat guidance to doing that. And so this is like another component of something that I had interest in doing, and I still do. But all of that together said, okay, how could I just, if I wrote a book, how could I contribute towards furthering this idea or for propelling people in this direction? So, so again, I focused on 18 to 25-year-olds. The book wasn't written for an 18 to 25-year-old. It was technically, and I'll explain that in a second. But essentially, the thing that an 18 to 25-year-old has in abundance, which people don't necessarily hold on to when they get older, is the idea of the openness of their life. They're at a point in time where they have the ability to possibly do anything. They're right there at the beginning of it. Now I would say that's true of people that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and above. I just think that people become less aware of it once they're older because they become fixed and they become settled. So they have, for many different reasons, feel like they can't change whatever it is they're doing. So I'm saying the book really is towards all of that. But the reason, so what I ended up doing was, the advice that I received was, you should pick an avatar, which is basically you're writing to a single individual, because you can't write to the masses. You have to write to one person. And when you write to one person, that can speak to, that can then speak and translate to others. So I took my son at the time, who was the oldest son, and I said if I could put this book into his hands and he would know, like, from me having taken the time to distill the way that I would give guidance in how you should go about your life and how you should think about the decisions that you're going to make and how you can grow from all that. That was what I distilled into the book. So it would be as a older father or someone that had a little bit more experience and had these unconventional paths to success. This is what I would hand over and I could give, that they could read from my perspective how they could go about and how they can take the next steps in their life. So that was the perspective that I took and put into the book. And so far, it's seen lots of great success and lots of positive feedback from people that have read it.
That is awesome. Guys, we're going to put together the links so you can get Adam's book, The Wonder Effect. Adam, talk to us about some of the principles that are there. And I've always told people, within the walls of the covers house wisdom in books. And I always try to tell them to start book clubs, buy a book and a couple of books, you guys, and read it, the same book, and have conversation as Adam was talking about, seeking truth. From many different vantage points. And if you guys can put that stuff together, when you're done with that book, man, you're going to learn some powerful truth that you will rescue many of you from where you're at. So, Adam, talk to us a little about this tool that you have put together, this book, this hard work, and all the knowledge, again, with the perspective of your children, your son, the wonder effect. What are some of those principles that are riding in there that you feel was powerful enough to change yours and can also change your son?
Right. So I'll go through like a few of these concepts in general, and I think that they are very powerful, and I think it's very important to dig deeper in them, because what I try to do is basically provide the framework that will give people permission to pursue and to succeed in whatever they're choosing to. So the first perspective would be this idea of what I call crushing false idols or groupthink. The idea simply is that what's good for the collective isn't necessarily good for the individual. And so what I mean by that is that you may be told a whole host of things that are going to be important and good for you that just might not be so. So you should be thoughtful in considering the things that you feel like you quote unquote should do, because you might feel that way because that's what's better for the collective if everybody does this, but it might not be good for you, the individual. That's the first step. Second step is getting to know yourself. And the thing is that it's difficult to know yourself or get to know yourself if you have these layers and layers of things that are on you or superimposed on you that don't let you get to see or get a sense of where you're naturally inclined. I often will say, and it's in the book as well, is this idea of dissatisfaction can be a positive thing. The idea of dissatisfaction is you're basically saying to yourself, you're not happy with the way that things are and you're seeking change. You want something to change. And oftentimes that change needs to be yourself. You have to change if you want something different. So that's like this other idea of getting to know yourself. The other thing is that in that pursuit, I think that it's important to realize and contextualize failure. Failure is something that I think is very important. I think that it's important because it's basically a feedback loop. I have this idea that that in schools, the way that they should more appropriately use grades is basically to determine what information you have incorporated and understood. And so if you, for example, if you got a 70 on a test, that means you learned 70% of the information, 30% of the information you didn't. And you should loop back to that to fill in and backfill the information that you need. So that's the idea of failure. But that is to say to you that if you've decided that something that you want to pursue is important to you, so then I say look at it as the concept of life. You have life and the learnings that can come as a curriculum. So basically, if you're starting at whatever point you're at and you're stretching yourself, wanting to go to somewhere that's farther than you believe currently is possible, you can backfill and understand that there's going to be several things that you'll need to learn in order to be able to get to that, to be the different person, to be able to do the different thing and to have that different future. And so that creates a certain level of curriculum, which I sometimes will say life as a quilt in that sense, where you stitch together all the different experiences and learnings that you have. The next idea is the idea of the power of mentorship. So there's different types of mentors that can help lead you along the way. Some are mentors that will offer you the sustained motivation because they'll say you're on the right track. There are others that will give
Yeah.
you actual guidance. And there are others that I would call connector mentors, where they'll connect you to others that can help you pursue that direction that you're wanting to pursue. I have a couple more, but I don't know if you have any questions so far because
Yeah.
I just want to check before I continue. Do you want me to
Yeah. I
continue?
mean, I'm glad that you're offering that to them. So yeah, continue if you
Okay.
will.
So the other part is that you need to have a sense of adventure because before when we were talking just before we got on, we were talking about this idea of needing courage, and you need courage if you're going to explore and you're going to pursue things that you don't feel yet comfortable or confident that you will have success in. So you have to have a sense of a sense of adventure and an adventurous spirit to be willing to pursue and go after those things, which again is the reason why you have to contextualize failure, because oftentimes it might take a lot of different experiences along the way in that adventurous spirit. You might have failures, and that's part of that learning process. So that's to be aware of. And then just
Yeah.
well, two more things. The idea is you have to also have a personal compass. That personal compass is I've set a direction that I'd like to go and I'd like to pursue, but at the same time, I want to have values that I feel like I can be true to in that pursuit. So that's an important thing to be aware of, because you might not, if you don't have a compass and you don't have a sense of direction as far as your values go, you might not be happy with the person that you become in the pursuit of whatever the direction is that you want to go. So you have to have those points of your compass set. And then the last thing is the idea of serving others and giving back. I ultimately would say that the whole reason you're pursuing all of these things is because at your core, you are here for a reason, and deep down we all have that sense that we're here for a reason, and that's really what's the engine that's motivating and driving you. So if you so I only go to it at the end of the book, but the idea is that figure out those things that you feel like you're here for, that you'd like to contribute back, and that will act as the engine and the motivation for you to pursue any of those things that you have listed in your life or in your journaling or whatever that you want to go after or to learn or to experience.
I love it, man. And for those who are listening, we're going to put together those links, as I mentioned to you, for you guys to get Adam's book. It's important that you do, because those principles that he mentioned, you want to get a more robust understanding and revelation from it and about it, so that you can be able to use it as a guidepost to help you to move through your life, so that you can become effective, as he said, and change this world as you become a disciple. And it is one of the most powerful things in the world, because I keep telling people only disciples will change the world, because they have to become disciplined in knowledge and obtaining knowledge and so forth. So we're going to make sure that you have access to him and all of his work, so that you can learn and change your life. Adam, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment, man.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure and really enjoyed it, Ken.
Thank you so much, sir. I really enjoyed it. I love it.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.